On March 14, 1912, tragedy struck the small mountain town of Hillsville, Virginia. It was the day when old man Floyd Allen, who had a reputation of taking the law into his own hands, was on trial for forcibly taking his two nephews from a sheriff's deputy. It was the talk of the town, and people packed the courtroom to see if Floyd would finally go to jail. When the jury finally came back with a guilty verdict that fateful morning, an epic gunfight broke out between the Allens and court officials. 57 bullets fired in just under 2 minutes. 5 people died, 7 were injured, and Floyd and his son were eventually caught and sentenced to the electric chair. The courthouse tragedy of 1912 made international headlines and forever changed the lives of everyone involved. It's a story that continues to raise questions for people in this community more than 100 years later, especially for one man who, in his search into his family's involvement in this tragedy, made a remarkable discovery.
Nobody really knows what happened.
At this point, I put in 800 or 900 hours of research.
They accounted for 57 shots being fired in the courtroom.
The story is compelling. People love to hear it, whether they're from here or not.
Judge Massey died in my grandfather's arms. These were Mr. Campbell's original files.
Howard Sadler is a local realtor whose grandfather was good friends with the presiding judge that day. Judge Massey ended up getting caught in the gunfire and later died. Sadler says he heard the story of his grandfather's involvement in the tragedy many times as a kid.
Stories that my mother told me as a young boy or a youngster about my grandfather, Howard Cecil Gilmer, being with a fellow named Judge Massey when he was shot in the courtroom, and Judge Massey died in my grandfather's arms.
His interest in this story began when his travels recently took him past the Sidna Allen house in Fancy Gap, which is now under renovation. He says it was then when he recalled a scrapbook in the attic of his childhood home that belonged to his grandmother. Inside that book, a .38 caliber live bullet believed to be from that shooting. It was then that he decided to do a little digging to discover more about his grandfather's involvement in the shootings. It would be a journey that would lead to more than 1,400 hours of research over the next 2 years here in the bowels of the Wythe County Courthouse, leading to discoveries of not only his grandfather's much deeper connection to the Hillsville courthouse shootings and the ensuing murder trials, but also uncovered documents no one had ever seen before. After the courthouse shootout, Floyd Allen and many of his family took off, disappearing into the woods, and would manage to elude capture for weeks, some for months. However, they were all eventually captured, arrested, and put on trial for their involvement in the shootings. 7 murder trials in all, and Sadler's grandfather, he later learned, testified during all of them.
I ran across articles about my grandfather's testimony. I'm scratching my head saying, what testimony could that be? So I called my older siblings and asked them their memory of my grandfather being involved in anything about this, and they knew nothing about anything having to do with testimony or anything else.
So he took his quest for more answers here to the Wythe County Courthouse. It was here where Floyd Allen and his son Claude would be tried for their part in the courthouse shooting. Sadler met and eventually became friends with Wythe County Clerk of Court Hayden Horney. And with his help, Sadler would spend hours combing through old files and records, searching for anything to shed light on his grandfather's involvement.
He spent days, half days, hours just running in trying to get stuff for the last 2 years, I guess. But he sat and read through the volumes, the deposition, the old court order book, and all trying to find information.
And what he discovered was remarkable.
We go back into the vault and pull out these beautiful books, the original trial transcripts of Floyd Allen's murder trial in Wythe County. And 26 pages of testimony later, now I'm hooked. So now I'm on a quest.
Not only did he find his grandfather's testimony, but he also uncovered other documents that had never seen the light of day, including handwritten instructions the judge gave the jury that day. Even with all of this, Sadler knew his quest wouldn't be complete until he found what he referred to as the Holy Grail of documents.
The penultimate document, I oftentimes refer to it as the Holy Grail, was in fact indictment number 1, which was that forcible rescue indictment. And nobody had ever seen it. Nobody since the days of the trial.
Why was it so important? Why was this like the Holy Grail?
Bereft of this document, there's no indictment, there's no trial, there's no shootout.
Then one day, he posed a question to Hayden, a question he says no one seemed to be able to answer.
Well, I began to ask him about the fact that there were no exhibits, law order books, trial testimony, but how can you have 7 murder trials and there's not a single exhibit in the courthouse? He said they've been missing for forever. Nobody knows where they are. They've been searched and looked for over and over again, but we've never been discovered.
However, Sadler would later find out they weren't gone, but hidden. Because this case drew such a huge public interest, those files were protected. The area where all court documents are filed was once open to the public, and there were fears that someone would walk in and take them. So the tag on the file was flipped.
So it wouldn't be so obvious what was in that file.
Because of Sadler's insatiable appetite to learn more about this case, Hayden decided to search again. But finding it among the thousands of court files that go back as far as the 1700s wouldn't be easy. Until one day, something seemed out of place.
Looking at all these hundreds and hundreds of file boxes, and saw one file box that had an A and a small X written on a paper tag on the front of the file box. And it wasn't the A and the X that got his attention, it was the color of the tag. And the color was a manila tint to it. And all the other file boxes around it were this amber color. And so he went over to the file box, pulled it out, slipped the tag out, turned it around. It says Commonwealth versus Floyd Allen, Sidney Allen, Claude Allen et al., 1912.
Hayden knew it was the file Sadler wanted, the file that contained the indictment of old man Floyd Allen.
This indictment was for Floyd Allen, Sidney Allen, and Barnett Allen.
The indictment would go into the jury room without anything written below. Typically then, the foreman would write the verdict underneath.
We, the jury, find the defendant Floyd Allen guilty as charged in the within indictment and fix his punishment at confinement in the penitentiary of this state.
Okay.
Of 1 year. William Foster, within about 2 to 3 minutes after having written this, was shot dead in the courtroom.
A significant discovery to a story that has long been told as legend, told and retold in oral history, that now has a little more clarity.
It was a very poignant moment that's hard to describe, because I'm sitting there in the courthouse holding a document that chances are nobody else has held in their hands for 100 years. That's the key to this entire courthouse tragedy that has been written about for now 105 years. To be the architect of discovery for this was truly a pivotal moment for me.
A pivotal moment to unlocking just some of the mystery surrounding a case that has been talked about and debated for more than 100 years.